Hello, and welcome to Michael's Minty Music. Today we review Pink Floyd's 1983 album, The Final Cut. It's alright, but it's really not that special. Really nothing special here, unfortunately. This is the track listing, and these are the tracks I added to my playlist. 6 out of 13, just under half. This album is definitely not as good as some of their other albums. It's super slow. It has some amount of variety, but it's not really good variety. It results in an album which doesn't really have a distinct feeling, except for maybe sad. Like, that's maybe the only distinct feeling here. Most of the songs which start off the album really aren't that good or even upbeat. You don't really get a hint of sort of any energy until track 5, in my opinion. Side 2 is a little bit better. It comes together a little bit better. It's got the same sort of feeling with a variety of music, whereas side 1 just has one feeling with one type of music, especially for the first 3 or 4 songs. They're all kind of very similar. But side 2 is still kind of missing that energy. So it's really, side 2 certainly doesn't save the album in any sense. There were no singles off this album, but my favorite song here is probably The Hero's Return, although Not Now John was also in contention. Those are the only 2 real upbeat songs on the whole album, but they aren't super upbeat or anything. They just have some amount of energy, which most of the other songs don't really have. So a lot of the songs on this album are very similar, and they all kind of sound the same, with the exception of a couple of them. And then the best ones here are probably, really, Two Suns in the Sunset is probably the best version of the song that is the main sort of style on the album. But that's still not really able to push the album up to a good spot, in my opinion. So I rank this album 5th out of all of Pink Floyd's albums so far. It's certainly not as good as any of their post-Dark Side of the Moon stuff. Definitely all of the other albums pretty much released in the 70s were better. It is, I would say, definitely better than most of the early 60s work, just on the virtue of having more good songs. In my opinion, I briefly considered whether Obscured by Clouds was better than The Final Cut. I think it's close, but I think The Final Cut is just on average better because the songs on average are better, but there are definitely some Obscured by Clouds songs which I like more than pretty much everything off of The Final Cut. So I think The Final Cut has a better average quality, but misses out on getting better songs. Additionally, this album doesn't take my top spot from 1983. That stays with The Police's Synchronicity, which just has more good songs than The Final Cut. Both of these albums don't really come together greatly, so it really just comes down to which one has more good songs, and Synchronicity definitely does. Next up is Duran's self-titled 1993 album. It's usually called The Wedding Album due to the cover being wedding photos. But it's technically just called Duran. It hit its 30th anniversary last Saturday, so it seemed like a good time to review it. It's all right. So, thanks, and as always, stay minty.